In today's episode of Comics and Cosplay, we continue our Convention Week coverage and discuss the topic of convention ticket prices and if they're becoming too high. So if you're just not joining our channel for the first time this week, we're holding what we call Convention Week, in which each episode this week, we discuss a different topic surrounding anime and comic book conventions. And in today's episode, I want to discuss the topic of convention ticket prices and if they're becoming way too high and not a value for what the fans ultimately truly get. So my personal answer to this question is a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. I think there are conventions out there that give you a lot of value for your money, and even though some of these have low and high ticket prices, that the value you get at the whole experience and weekend is really worth it. Whereas there are other cons that are just trying to push to get into 3 and 4 day territories so they can charge upwards and close to $100 for their ticket prices. So being more specific, I think there are certain cons that are really at a great value point and the fan gets a lot out for what they're paying. And I think there are certain cons that are just trying to add as many days possible to their conventions so they can jack up the price and get as close to $100 or above $100 for a weekend pass. And even though they haven't really invested the time and the necessary work to add value to the con to make it worth those extra days. I think there are a lot of cons that are running for 3 days that really need to be at 2 days, and some that are trying to do 4 that should probably just be at 3. One con in particular that I think is a really big problem with this is New York Comic Con. I just think that they've added so many days and they're trying to race to be, the counterpart in the East Coast for San Diego Comic Con, but they haven't really invested the time and the infrastructure to really build out a full 4 days worth of convention. You see this really obviously when you look at the panels that they have planned. I've been to a few of the panels. I never think they're that great, and I always feel like they kind of come off at an amateurish fan level, and they're done more by like people just trying to get a free pass to New York Comic Con, and not someone really as dedicated to putting on a great panel. Now I'm not saying these are all panels that are there, but a majority of them have this feel more than less. And when I was at San Diego, every panel is either run by a big studio or corporation that's trying to get out a message, and even their lesser like kind of fan panels are done by big stalwarts in their industry or fields and are really working to put on a great panel for people there. So I think that's something that really needs to be addressed, and I think that's why a lot of these cons, I can't justify the prices they're asking for, and I don't think they should expect their fans to do so either. However, I don't want to sound like I'm completely against the convention side, because I do think there are some aspects in which people have not truly been fair to them, especially in ticket pricings for certain cons. I think a lot of people will take one con and say, oh, this is at this price, and this is at this price, and say, it's an exact match. And I think that's unfair to certain conventions. I was reading some blog posts and somebody was complaining about the Philly Wizard World convention a few weeks ago and saying, why is this price so high? I was at MegaCon and it was half that price. And I was at Baltimore Comic Con and it was half that price. And I don't think that's a really fair comparison, because if you think about, conventions in the Northeast and how the Northeast is set up as a whole, there's not a lot of space. And so, conventions and organizing these spaces for large periods of time are just much more costly. That does get passed on to the convention organizers. And a con like MegaCon, which is way down in Orlando, and if you've ever been to that con, you will see it is massive, the convention space they have there. When I was there for MegaCon, they weren't even using half of it for MegaCon plus the other cheerleading convention that was going on. So the convention space is much cheaper for those con organizers, so they can bring the ticket prices down. I think cosplayers need to really look and see, don't compare what did I pay in this city versus this city, because that's not going to be the same just based on geographical differences. But really look and see what value are they giving you. What are the panels like? What are the guests they're bringing like? Is there enough to justify these prices? So I think that's a little bit, how we should put these con prices in a little bit better perspective. So now the obvious question is, what cons do I think are a great value and worth the price? Now keep in mind, this is a list of cons I think are worth the value, not necessarily the cheapest, but where you get the most for your buck. And starting off the list, and most obviously I think would be San Diego Comic Con. Yes, I'm a San Diego fanboy, but I think until you've truly been to this con and seen what you get and what there is to do there, you can't really judge this con. I know everyone likes to harp on it, the tickets are too much, and it's not really for con goers and true nerds, but that's all BS by people most of the time that haven't even been to the con. There's so much value you get at this con. I mean, they have just about everything. Almost every major nerd or publisher property goes to this convention. And even outside of the con, like say you just get tired of being in there, the city is basically transformed into this huge convention as a whole because all the local shops and things do various signings and events there and product demos that there's just untold amounts of value here. So even though it has a high sticker value price of over $100 for a weekend pass, it is completely worth it. And second on my list, as I already mentioned previously, would be MegaCon. Down in Orlando, it's a bit of a trek, but that con is just massive and has a ton of great artists that come to it. I was really impressed by how many comic book artists come there, and they kind of feature them front and center, as well as the numerous, vendors and groups that they have there. I think it's one of the most underrated cons actually in the country right now, and I'm surprised more people don't go. Coming in at number 3 on my list would be Anime Expo, especially for my anime fans. I think this is one of the bigger anime conventions that's still sub $60, which is really impressive given how they do so many different events, bring out so many voice actors. It's held out on the West Coast, it's gorgeous weather, a lot of great panels. I just think this is also another underrated con that more people don't take advantage of, and definitely worth the money, and it's really impressive how they can get so much and they're still below $60 for a weekend pass when a lot of other cons are way above that. And finally, I would say these are kind of a hybrid on the level. I had to pick between the two, and that would be, KatsuCon in DC as well as AwesomeCon. I know though AwesomeCon is will be in its 3rd year this upcoming year, but I still think there's a ton of value at this con. It's not, overpriced, but just right. I kind of wish there was a little bit more to do with the con. Same goes for KatsuCon. KatsuCon is huge, brings a ton of people there. I think their paneling series could be fleshed out a little bit more and a little bit more rounded, but still a great value for what you get. The only problem is you have to sacrifice your Valentine's Day weekend. So that's a little bit of a trade-off, but I think these 4 cons are the ones you should really, if you're trying to plan a con outside of your hometown or local con, these are one of these 4 should be the ones you target. So those are my thoughts on this topic. I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think? Do you think con ticket prices are too high, too low, or just about right? Or which cons do you feel are giving you enough value for your worth? Is there something I left off, or do you think I may be wrong about New York Comic Con? Is that really have a lot more value than I give it credit for? Let me know in the comment section down below. I really appreciate all your comments. You guys give me a lot of different perspectives and ways of thinking about things that I don't always think about naturally. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to our videos so you don't miss out on any of the future episodes for Con Week, as well as maybe go back and check out some of our previous topics, as we've had a great discussion about different issues surrounding the convention scene. Anyway, I'm your host Ian from Saturday Morning Cosplay, and I'll see you on the con floor.